This content is for informational purposes only. You should not construe any such information or other material as legal, tax, investment, financial, or other advice. Nothing contained on here constitutes a solicitation, recommendation, endorsement, or offer by Draper Goren Holm or any third-party service provider to buy or sell any securities or other financial instruments whatsoever.
I'm bringing out the entire bottle of Patron.
They're all exactly the same.
Crypto art, and then what it really is an NFT.
Wow.
Eddie wants to slap the bag.
So this is the next best thing.
DeFi is going to be a bubble.
It's provably scarce.
With Mad Dog.
Crypto, gold, and silver.
Transparent substance.
Take my money, start a war with it.
Without further ado.
Cheers to you, brother.
Get shit done.
Because the system has to collapse before that.
My Corona.
Cheers. I feel much better now.
Cheers.
Wow, that was heavy. What's up, Blockchain and Booze Nation? Welcome to session 51 of Blockchain and Booze. I can't believe we've been doing this for nearly a year. And I'm even more surprised that what has started as just this casual get-together has now evolved into this kick-ass event that we do every single week, Tuesday evening, 5 p.m. Pacific time, alongside Cointelegraph, shout out to their team, and Blockchain Radio, shout out to their team. My name is Adam. I'm your host, Adam Levy, Levy Chain. And I'm from LA. I'm from Draper Goren Holm. And just to give a quick brief about me and what we do. So I'm the ops manager at DGH, and we're basically an early stage investment firm that we invest in early stage blockchain startups. And it just so happens we put together the best crypto and blockchain events in the space. And I'm drinking a little bit of tequila with lemonade today. And we got a really sexy topic planned, although I'm not hyper convinced that it's the sexiest thing in the world, but these guests that I'll bring on stage in just a minute are convinced. So without further ado, let's bring up all our guests today. What's going on, guys? How you feeling? Welcome to Blockchain and Booze.
Hey, guys.
Hello.
Cheers. Cheers. Cheers.
Cheers. Cheers.
How's everyone feeling?
Great.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah. We got some people in the chat right now. I got people lining into Remo, which, by the way, if you are not in Remo, join the conversation live at meet.blockchainbooze.io. And there you can ask some questions. You can engage with other people live. And let's get this thing started, guys. We're talking about all things enterprise blockchain related. How sexy is that? It's amazing. We got an incredible lineup of guests here, each with their own respective knowledge and expertise in the subject. So I'm gonna stop talking and I'm gonna let everyone introduce themselves. So Kia, we can start with you. Nitin, we can go to you next. Medha, and then Erich. Guys, let me know where are you from? What are you doing? Who do you work for? And what are you drinking? So Kia, take the stage.
All right. Yeah, my name is Kia Mosayeri. I'm a product manager at BitGo. BitGo is an infrastructure and financial service provider. We do custody, we do prime brokerage services, and we also provide infrastructure services like APIs to north of hundreds of exchanges for crypto. I'm a product manager. I focus on DeFi, new blockchains, NFTs. I lead WBTC here at BitGo, which is our wrapped Bitcoin product. And I got some nice Kentucky bourbon on the rocks with me. Super excited to be talking enterprise blockchain with such a veteran panel here and yourself, Adam. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Kia. Nitin.
Hey, thanks. So my name is Nitin. I currently serve as Director of Financial Sciences and Digital Assets. I founded the Blockchain Labs in IBM. This is early 2013, 2014. I realized we were doing a lot of other work around databases and technology, so moved to founding Digital Asset Labs. And my current role is looking into 5-10 years ahead in terms of what financial services would be like, which is helping large financial institutions, banks, sort of cope up and understand the elements of decentralized financing and what they need to do, both from technology perspective as well as from regulatory and compliance perspective, to stay ahead. So my current role is sort of focusing on those elements, and glad to be here. I'm drinking Inkberry, which is a Cabernet from Australia, from the central region of Australia. So Glad to be here with
Nice.
Eric and Medha, and of course.
Nice. Cheers to you, Nitin. Medha, take the stage.
Yeah, Medha Parlik, CTO, one of the co-founders of CasperLabs, the company building the Casper network. And gosh, I'm here because we are hoping to build a blockchain that will be used for public compute for enterprises. So we've built a lot of really amazing features into the Casper protocol that facilitate the use of public blockchain infrastructure by enterprise. And kind of fell into that space because that's where I worked. I lived and breathed enterprise software for about 20 years as a director of engineering, director of quality control, quality assurance, really responsible for the large scale deployments, right, of software as a service. So, all the Web 2 software as it's called, right? So happy to be here. I'm drinking Cosmopolitans.
I feel like, Medha, that's like your typical drink. You've been on in Blockchain and Booze a few times.
Yes, I have. This is my drink.
I think I also have you in the intro. I think you saw yourself over there drinking the Cosmopolitan. Nice. Yeah. Eric, welcome to Blockchain and Booze. How are you?
I'm doing great, and thank you for having me. So I'm here tonight in Paris, France, and I am the CEO of IPwe, and IPwe has created the world's first global patent market, and we have the simple mission of creating the patent asset class. We work a lot with Casper and the folks at IBM, and I'm happy to be here tonight. My drink of choice is a white burgundy.
Nice, guys. Cheers to everyone. Thank you for being on Blockchain and Booze. So I wanna get the conversation started with you guys. Are obviously the fanatics and quite the experts when it comes to this subject. And quite frankly, I don't find it as sexy as you do. Obviously, you're in your respective positions. But why enterprise blockchain? Like, what is it about this stuff that gets each of you guys going? And I want to hear from everyone here. So we can start with Kia, move to Nitin, Medha, and end with Eric.
I think, each one of us came to the blockchain space for our own reasons. But one thing that has brought us here is transparency, permissionless, and decentralized aspects of blockchains. Today, we're seeing this with Bitcoin as an asset, as a store of value. We're seeing this on Ethereum with decentralized finance. We believe that the financial infrastructure will become decentralized, will become permissionless. The same thing is going to expand over to many other aspects of our lives, payments, remittances. All of these things are becoming decentralized as well. What makes me excited about enterprise blockchain is the transparency of it, the fact that there's complete information asymmetry between all us stakeholders, their users, and us as maybe shareholders and stakeholders in those companies. I believe enterprise blockchain is going to vastly simplify what's going on in the enterprise world. It's going to allow us to overcome some of the challenges that we've had, that some of them are actually not necessarily technology challenges, such as governance. So in short, that's what makes me very, very excited about enterprise blockchain. And recently at BitGo, we've been very excited to be working with the CasperLabs team, supporting their blockchain in our infrastructure, in our API services, which we offer to a lot of service providers within the industry in Medha. And we also service a lot of investors within the industry. So for example, if you're holding in north of $150 million of other people's assets, you need a qualified custodian to help you with managing your assets. That's the services we provide. And I myself spend a lot of my time thinking about DeFi and how different blockchains are going to interact with one another, each attracting a certain niche and use case, and how we can basically allow this flow of information, flow of assets between these blockchains and prepare the world for the next big step.
Yeah, it sounds, it's very purpose driven. And I feel like a lot of people that get into crypto in general very early on are very wide driven, right? They want to accomplish something bigger than themselves. I'm curious, Nitin, if you have a similar insight here.
There's a story behind this, Adam, and everything that Kia mentioned, I tend to concur. In 2012, 2013, I was working on this mobile payments. I was CTO of mobile payments, and we were trying to figure out as to what do we do with, what is our go-to-market with mobile payments. And I went and did research, met 65 different payment processes around the world. And in every conversation, Bitcoin, blockchain kept popping up. So I went down 2 weeks, researched the whole thing in terms of what it is. And I went back to our execs and said, look, we should really look into this, not so much as it can change payment business forever, but at the same time, if you look at blockchain, it's a transaction system. And if there's something that we have done historically from an IBM perspective, we have built transaction systems. We have built the historical systems behind ACH and behind the existing financial. So I think the proposition that I had for our value prop is we need to understand this better. We need to position ourselves better in sort of continuing our legacy of a transaction system provider. And Adam, that led to getting hooked in 2013, and I didn't buy enough Bitcoins that I looked at. It was $112 back in the day. And I did, looked into a lot of those things in terms of the potential of what cryptocurrencies and crypto assets and digital assets would transform. And my journey sort of led to figuring out as to, because we had a client base, 90% of banks are our clients, and we had to look from a lens of the disruptive, but also as well as transformative power of blockchain technology for them. So we quickly went back and reformed in terms of what we can do to, again, not only address the financial services industry, but also look into the adjacent industry like supply chain and so on and so forth, and figure out as to what is our go-to-market and positioning around it. So our interest from blockchain is do two folds. One is transformation of a really aging system, and I draw analogies between the conversations we would have had in pre-internet era of moving information, moving files, and suddenly people would ask, how will this change my business? And suddenly all the information brokers are gone. And that's the analogy we gave to our enterprise client to say, look, if you're in the business of moving value, just like information brokers, you are very primed to be disintermediated. And what can we do to not only help you understand it, but adopt and adapt to this newer model that's evolving? And so it's been, again, nonstop 8 years of trying to, and it was a hard sell too, because, unlike the disruptive power of fintech, you're dealing with large banks, large financial institutions. They have a business going, they have P&L, they have their stuff going. So you trying to tell them to think differently, it is a really hard sell. And for the first 2 years, I just took upon myself to say, okay, what's different between blockchain and Bitcoin, which just chewed up so much time. And I'm glad we are past that stage at the moment.
That's actually a lot of what I spent getting into back when I was studying. It's like trying to understand what differentiates Bitcoin from blockchain and how the two can live separately. Medha, I know you have quite like the tech background yourself, right? So what is it about enterprise blockchains that got you so hyped, so excited? One, to co-found CasperLabs, right? And to pivot into crypto.
Gosh, yeah. So crypto, I kind of fell into the rabbit hole, right? And I see the future of fiat currency, and so been looking for like what is going to be the solution, right? And so when I discovered cryptocurrency and blockchain, it was like an aha moment, right? The light went off, and it was like, yes, this is where I need to be. For me, it was almost like a calling that this is what I should be. Everything was kind of leading up to this moment of me getting involved in cryptocurrency, because I feel so passionately about what's been done to fiat currency, the effect on the middle class individual, lower class individuals, economically disadvantaged people, and the effects of the ivory towers of the current financial institutions. So they definitely don't like what's happening with blockchain, but I think it needs to, an upending is due, for lack of a better term. And so that really is why I get up in the morning, what really makes me passionate about it. But, when you talk about enterprise blockchain, kind of stepping back, right? I took a look when I designed some of the features in the Casper protocol. I came at it from the perspective that I had in terms of what I needed in order to build a business, right? I've been designing software products for a very long time. And when I sit back and I think about, well, if I really want to build a business that uses software, there's some real simple things that I need. And I just didn't find those capabilities available in other blockchain protocols. They were just really missing. They were very, very hard to interact with the blockchain protocol to do the things that I needed to do in order to build a sustainable, software product that I could build a business on top of. And so we kind of took a step back and we built all those features. And then when we sat back and we thought about it, we're like, well, deeper analysis demonstrated to us that this is why one of the key reasons that enterprise blockchains are all private. It's because of these problems, right? There's a lack of control over their code, a lack of governance tools. And so when we dug a little deeper, we realized that DeFi protocols have the same problem, right? All software has to be governed in the final analysis. And so what we really built into the Casper protocol are software governance tools. And you can talk about it as enterprise blockchain. We do provide white glove service for companies like Erich, right, where we're basically building the solution for them, holding their hand as they transition into newer blockchain technology. If they don't know anything about blockchain, we will help them through that process. But more importantly, the core capabilities of the protocol really enable both DeFi protocols and central protocols to manage their on-chain code, and that's really what it's about, right? And agree with everything everyone else here is saying, but I see blockchain as part of a larger application architecture. Be it a DeFi protocol or a large company, you're going to have a mobile site. You're going to have a mobile app. You're going to have a website. You're going to have a database backend. You're going to have analytics. That's what you need in order to build a business, right? And so then there's a whole bunch of other technical requirements that kind of pile on top of that. That's what we have really designed, purpose-built Casper for.
Yeah, it's super interesting. Erich, I want to jump into your story because the more research I was doing on IPwe, the more fascinated I became with what you guys are actually trying to solve. And I feel like it's more niche in the enterprise blockchain side of things, specifically when it comes to IP patents and the transactions and the transfer of ownership. Talk a little bit more about like what got you going in the enterprise blockchain space and why that's led to the IP side.
Yeah, so my background was nowhere near as altruistic as what you've heard. So I had this curious background in math, finance, economics, and law. And at some point in time, I was looking for a really large, obscure asset that people did not understand well, and stumbled upon patents in 2003. And as a result of that lack of understanding and complete lack of transparency, there was this huge arbitrage opportunity, and I made a fortune off of that. So over the next 10 years, I became one of the biggest patent trolls in the world. And then when I retired from that in 2012 or so, I became the pariah of the pharmaceutical industry when I would attack their patents on huge drug franchises. And so in a way, blockchain kind of brought me out of the gutter. And what happened is that I realized that technology had the ability to make this wildly obscure thing that completely lacked transparency much more transparent. I know, by the way, when you combine it with AI, it really takes you the rest of the way there. And so that happened I came to blockchain like 2017, actually December 7th, 2017. I don't think I'd even heard the term before then.
Do you celebrate that anniversary?
I do, and I'll tell you what I bought and I sold, unfortunately, but whatever. I sold a long time ago. But yeah, so what attracted me was I said, hey, this is a huge asset. IP is a big asset, trillions, pick a number. And if what you do is that you take the data that's going to sit on that blockchain and use that on the predictive analytics side, on the AI side, you can fundamentally transform this. And what you can do, which will improve the asset class, is make it more understandable by more and more people, which is what you need to create an asset class. So step one is that, we're bringing finance people into it. But to not get into the boring details of that, the enterprise blockchain piece of it is that transparency piece that was missing. And frankly, but for that, I would still be doing what I was doing. But I actually saw it as such an important change that it would actually eliminate my job. And so it was that was the transformation for me, a little different than the rest of the people.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And I think trying to dig down your patent troll side of things and hearing those stories is a topic within itself. But trying to focus the conversation more on enterprise blockchain adoption, okay? And funny enough, when I was studying, IBM was like that number one resource that I reverted to. I think it was like back in early 2018, late 2017, attending Hyperledger meetups. and trying to understand, like legit attending like on-campus meetups, trying to understand from people that knew much more than I do, like how, like you said, the differentiation between Bitcoin and blockchain and how it can apply to many other use cases beyond finance. And that was like the most interesting thing for me diving into the space. And I feel like we've come a long way since then, obviously. And every single year, the industry develops and grows just a little bit more and a little bit more. And we learn about new things that we didn't have prior. What is the current state? Like, we're in 2021 now. What is the current state of enterprise blockchain? Where does it stand? And feel free, anyone, to kind of pick this one apart. Where are we right now?
From what I understand, a lot of enterprises are prototyping blockchain technology, right? They really don't know where to begin. They usually start with Hyperledger because it has the biggest brand in the space, right? So they definitely dive in there. They're talking to a lot of professional services companies to help them do prototyping of blockchain technology. My intuition is that, you know, enterprises will look to try to reduce risk through blockchain technology, improve transparency and auditing. We're seeing a lot of companies like Covalent get traction in the business intelligence space using blockchain technology. So companies can get more insight into how, you know, the blockchain is having an impact on their business operations. But that's my take on it.
Yeah. So I'll give you a little historical context, right? Because we did this journey in 2013, 2014. It was truly difficult to get across. And so, of course, Bitcoin was a bad word. And we were explicitly talked about that we will not mention Bitcoin with large banks, and look how far we've come along in terms of the industrial understanding of what this is. So we took this path of saying, you know what, let's tear apart the tech. Since we can't position Ethereum and Bitcoin because they're associated with cryptocurrencies, can we then tease apart the elements of blockchain, which is immutability, consensus, transparency, all the things that Kia that you mentioned, and can we not create it? I had the same mindset as Medha did, like in terms of figuring out the transaction volumes, figuring out the time it takes to process transaction. You always get, look, Visa, MasterCard is doing 20,000 TPS. Can we ever reach that scale with the existing technology? And so we begin to then tear apart latencies and going down to the wire level stuff and say, you know, for us to really balance out, and this is the crux of this, is scale, performance, security, and it's a perfect storm. It's a perfect storm to be able to achieve what today is a fragmented system. So I went down the same path that Medha did. It's like, hey, what is the real ideal system? And many of us in IBM research and our cohorts in other areas, and the Hyperledger Fabric was born as an element of that. But I think we solved a lot for permissioning element, which took away a lot of computational element that decentralized and permissionless and trustless network brought to the table. But I think a few things lag behind. The element of incentive economics, the element, all the things that Medha is doing now is to bring that whole thinking to enterprise blockchain. We said, now you need an admin and you need an entire apparatus to build these things. And suddenly it began to look more and more like a database. And so we went back to drawing board and said, what can we really do about this piece in which we can truly create this element of decentralization and distribution, trying to combat these elements. So after some time, like in 2017, 2018, I moved to a different area and exploring the public-private model, where I figured that if we were to use and this is the first principles approach, you know, Musk model to say, look, there'll be enough people in Ethereum and public networks trying to solve the scalability problem. Can I not use this as a public utility, create a fence, achieve all the things that we've been talking about in a permissioned private model, and yet use this as a massive computing, you know, infrastructure? Happy to share that, you know, at some point, but the state of blockchain, to Medha's point, I think people are tired of POCs. They're looking for solutions. They're looking for entry points. They're looking for API access, and don't have to deal with any of the last rhetoric that goes with it. And I think that's where we are, at least from my vantage point.
And I would, look, I every day I'm on the phone with the biggest companies in the world and governments, talking to them. And what I would say is, it was funny, when I got into the space in late 2017, I thought I was late because I would go to consensus conferences and I'm like, I don't even know what these people are talking about. And I was convinced I was late. And then it's in 2019, we went into an IBM accelerator program and I'm like, oh my God, I'm way early. I'm just way too early. What am I thinking of? And then today, what I would say is that acceptance is starting to happen. That's kind of the thing you look for at the enterprise level, right? And I can take you, I actually can remember when the internet and people were like, put off by that at the enterprise level. But you're now starting to get to the acceptance. And once you get acceptance, you're going to start to see uptake. And then that curve gets very steep, very quick. So you're still early. So if there's somebody out there thinking of doing the next great company with GGH, you got time, but you've got years, maybe 2. You don't have 10. So get on the program and get going, because you're still early. You don't let anybody tell you you're late. You're not. But you're in that, you're just about to hit that uptake phase. And when that hits, you want to be in the game.
So that's like where we are right now with NFTs, for example, right?
I think you're a little bit early with NFTs, but yeah, I mean, I know that it was just a $69 billion trade, so everybody wants to talk about it. $1 billion. But the reality is that's still a little early. That piece, that tokenization piece is still coming, but general enterprise blockchain, I rate between acceptance and uptick. We're right at that gap, whatever that looks like.
Yeah, I tend to agree.
Kia, how do you feel about all this?
Adam, just like yourself, I started hearing about enterprise right around 2018. There were a lot of cool proof of concepts coming along, but what that was that a lot of people like ourselves within these large enterprises who were at the frontier got their imagination tickled and wanted to build these proof of concepts. But at the time, the technology that we had was only good for proof of concepts. We didn't have what we have today, and we're still not quite there yet. But with things like Casper coming along, I think we're getting closer. Back then, we did not have a scalable blockchain at our hand, which we could go to these companies, show it to them. We could show the Ethereum roadmap, show it's going to go to ETH 2.0. I'm a huge ETH bull, but it's not there yet. And you can't expect people to come and build these $1 million, multi-billion-dollar enterprises on top of that. What we have today is blockchains like Casper that are custom built for enterprises. They're here, they're scalable, and they're decentralized. And on top of that, what I think is very important that CasperLabs is doing is the separation between, I think we should have Medha get into this later in the conversation, but the separation between the blockchain itself and the services that you provide. These enterprises cannot just go out there, hire their own Solidity devs and get in there and start coding. Whatever they do in all types of software, they always have consultancy firms helping them. They have veterans of the industry next to them, building with them side by side. And that's what's important here. We're now just getting to the stage where we have the layer 1 infrastructure that we needed. We have services like CasperLabs helping businesses like Erich's business actually get in there and build the applications that they need. And it's our job as another piece of infrastructure provider to help these services with things like key management. How do you interact with that blockchain and maintain that degree of separation? I think we're still early, but we're getting there.
So to your point really quick. So you were mentioning how enterprises, they won't go ahead and hire their own Solidity developers. They'll work with partners in order to establish their solutions. But now you hear like Solidity developers are like the most in-demand things, and you're seeing job posts from early stage DeFi projects, NFT projects to large scale enterprises, right? So elaborate on that more, because I've been like preaching to everyone, go learn Solidity. If you're a developer and you're creating websites, pivot, go learn Solidity, go learn how to program on Ethereum, go learn how to develop smart contracts. Like where does that kind of come into play? So are people hiring like their own like secluded team to work with these organizations? Like how does that work?
Absolutely. I mean, Solidity devs are one of the most in demand. And if anyone's a Solidity dev who's listening, please reach out to me. I am hiring.
There you go.
Yes. They're in such demand, but we cannot scale we can't go to the developer community and tell them, hey, all of you guys got to learn a new language now. There's always going to be need for Solidity devs on Ethereum. There's going to be multiple blockchains, but what's needed for enterprises is to get the layer 1 closer to what they're used to. And that's what Meta and team are doing with WebAssembly.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. That's why we went with WebAssembly, right? Because now you can use Rust, you can use assembly script, and JavaScript has a compilation target, C++ has a compilation target. And Casper can support all these languages. It's not a protocol fork, right? It's a bunch of client-side work that we have to do, and we can support these brand new languages, as well as our development environment is a Web 2 development environment. You can run Casper contracts in an IDE. This is the way software has always been built. You build your application, you compile it, and you run it right there in your integrated development environment. Why can't you do it with blockchain contracts, right? So, we see blockchain as a part of a larger application architecture. And the only way you can build a larger application architecture is if blockchain drops into it. Right. And I feel like this takes the current paradigm for development, kind of flips it on its head compared to what you see in blockchain today. Right. You see almost all the blockchains either have custom languages or you have to run a full node in order to even stage and run your contracts. And you don't need any of that with Casper. Right. So I can build a pipeline that builds my mobile app, my database integration, my web app, and it all comes together, integrated, tested along with the smart contracts. And I don't have to turn my entire development pipeline upside down. And it's hugely important for enterprises, right? Because risk is a big, big factor, right? They're not going to rebuild 20 years worth of software to include blockchain, right? It's just not realistic, right? So we give them the opportunity to carve out a piece of their architecture and say, that's the piece that goes on the blockchain. That's where we need trust. And Casper's perfectly suited for that.
Got you. Go ahead, Nitin.
I had a different perspective on this early on. So early on when we were going with this with Hyperledger Fabric and an IBM blockchain platform, we were looking at more not just development skills, because the enterprise has, as Medha, you probably know, there's Java camps that are there and they want to be able to use the IDEs and have the same, the DevOps lifecycle that has to be tied into it. But what we lacked at the time was blockchain architects, folks who understood decentralization, folks who understood distributed computing. And it's not as simple as having a client-based sort of programming models that go with it. Then we went down the path of looking into where we are today. Right, this is again embarking on this public-private model, going into what Medha is building, which is a massive computation structure similar to what Ethereum is going after, and Solidity is one part of it. But one thing that we constantly struggle, which is sort of my focus at the moment in the DeFi space, I'm focusing on two sort of core elements of helping financial industry understand the space. One is integration into existing systems. So these systems are database centric. They are batch process systems. Blockchain is more real time. They are more live and they are more token based. So how do you marry those two systems? And there's a fundamental disconnect between the computational model, but also how you realize a transaction. Because blockchain is a transaction system, most transaction systems require a database, and there's database synchronization, there's consistency, there's all this technical element, which is a massive baggage that the industry carries with itself. So that's one thing that we're trying to focus on. Second thing that I'm focused on, which I work with Promontory, which is our regulatory and compliance entity, is figure out the digital asset regulation and compliance framework. And what you're building, Medha, I think, because you have a digital asset in it, and including the folks who are going after frameworks like Ethereum, you have to understand the impact of whether you're using the digital asset for transaction processing or using the derivative digital assets. You have to have safekeeping and safeguarding, which is what BitGo is working on. So you can begin to see this peaceful fashion form into the whole thing. But what I'm also focusing on is basically the second stream is how do we reduce the cost of compliance by doing some of the things in terms of digital assets, whether it's custody, whether it's going after pooling these assets and figuring out the transaction volumes and so on and so forth. And those two, I think, are something which is grossly underappreciated, I think, in the enterprise space. And they're beginning to understand the space, but it's a ways to go, I think.
Interesting. Erich, I see you nodding your head. Medha, I see you guys nodding your head. Anything to add to that?
It's covered.
It's covered. Cool. Okay. So, Nitin, you talk also, you mentioned the whole point of like narratives, right? And Kia, you also mentioned this as well. Because that's what drives blockchain. That's what drives crypto. Narratives of things working in our favor, narratives of systems being revolutionized. And a lot of these narratives are fun to play around and to listen to and to kind of like contemplate, right? But like, how far along is the average enterprise organization in terms of assessing and adopting blockchains? Like, where are we actually in terms of practicality, like actually using a blockchain to facilitate day-to-day operations? And what are those verticals and kind of niches look like that are being done successfully?
So from the enterprise perspective, I'll give you a few anecdotal evidences that we've been involved with client engagement. So OCC, so there are a few things that we were working on, and I think here you would appreciate this. Medha, you will definitely appreciate this perspective, is that we were always looking into this uncertain regulatory environment, is what do you do with the digital assets? So if you want to get into payments or financial institutions, and then the moment the OCC interpretive letter, fourth interpretive letter came out, where they essentially gave permission for them to use this as a payment instrument, which is stable coins. And they used the word INVN, which was a proxy for blockchain, because they didn't want to sort of rattle the market with using that term. I think we begin to start the journey of enterprise understanding what is custody. And then you begin to see the likes of DBS and Fidelity and Goldman Sachs get into the custody business, because it's an essential part for not just secondary markets, but also being able to custody asset for both retail and institutional investors. And so to me, I think the POC phase for some of things is gone. I think they're trying to figure out, or at least from my vantage point, the financial services industry is trying to figure out what is the on-ramp, off-ramp, what do we do with digital assets, what is the framework that we need to adhere to. And I think from that perspective, Erich, your work is pivotal, because you're trying to bring sort of the patenting, which is also things of value, though it's classification from a fungible, which is definitely not a fungible unit, maybe it's a non-fungible, and you have different classification non-fungible tokens, is how do you create an environment that deals with things of value? And I think that's where the enterprise world is going after. Of course, supply chain has a long way to go, because it's much larger ecosystem, a lot of paperwork, a lot of antiquated systems. So I'll leave it at that for now, but it's a lot to unpack there, I think.
Anybody want to add anything else to that?
One of the things I think is going to happen, and I already see it happening broadly, in the space outside of blockchain, just generally, is I think people are demanding a higher level of trust, right? And I see blockchain really bringing about this trust layer for applications. And it doesn't need to be the entire application necessarily runs on the blockchain, but just very strategic small parts of it can really benefit from an additional layer of trust, right? We have really interesting pilots underway where we see companies implementing a layer of trust to, like, in Erich's example, to prove who owns a patent at any given point in time, right? Because there wasn't a trust layer around that. Or something simple as, references. Like, if I can prove I worked for a company for 10,000 hours, that I am a certain quality worker, right? And I don't need to do anything, because references can be funged, right? Supply chain is an excellent example of trust, right? One of the conversations I've had with someone pretty strategic in the supply chain world, they were using a private blockchain. I said, it's all fine and well until the hamburger meat isn't any good, and you got to prove to consumers that the hamburger meat is good now. And that's when you need a private blockchain, because you really don't have a trust layer with the public blockchain. I mean, with the private blockchain, that's when you need public, right? And so they're aware of it, and so it's coming, right? People are going to start demanding more and more trust, and pretty much it's going to become just what is expected, right? And those industries that companies that don't keep up are going to be left behind in the dust, quite frankly.
Medha, have you come in contact with weird meat lately, or what's going on here?
The example, because I think it was it Wendy's that had that problem with tainted meat? Chipotle recently had a problem with tainted meat, and it's really hard to regain consumer trust. I mean, it really is difficult to regain consumers' trust when you've had a problem in your supply chain, and a private blockchain just isn't going to cut it, right? I see that in 3 to 5 years that they're going to want to see, they're going to want to scan something to know where that product is sourced from. I think it's completely reasonable.
And that's the example that I give to a lot of people, is like supply chain management and tracking lettuce. Like, that's the most relevant outbreak that people in the public come in contact with. It's like a new strain of whatever has contaminated lettuce, has contaminated tomatoes, whatever it may be. So that's a very good point. Kia, I see you want to add something to that?
Yeah, look, what the internet did to kind of my generation is develop this sense of, I don't know something, I'm going to go look it up. It's on the internet, I'm going to find that. What blockchain is going to do is we're going to be able to prove that chain of custody of that information. My generation has become used to going on Wikipedia, finding information, but we've heard from all professors and teachers that do not trust that. And we're looking for the next source of truth. And blockchain can provide that for things that Medha is talking about. What that's going to translate into the financial world is like, I want to look at something like Compound, and I have complete information symmetry with everyone else on the market. We get the same data, we can all run the same analysis and come to the same conclusion. Whereas in the old world, we just don't know. We don't know where the assets are. We don't know who's holding them. We don't know where the risk is setting. Now expand that into, out of the financial world, into supply chain, into all other use cases of enterprise. We want information to be accessible. We want it to be online. We want people to find it. We want it to be provable on chain, online. This is just the next generation, the next iteration, the continuation of the internet.
It's fascinating. And again, I fell in love with this space, learning about supply chains and learning about, like I said, Nitin, like IBM Hyperledger and all the different product suites that IBM put in the pipeline so early on. And one of the biggest things that kind of challenged me in understanding the opportunity and the potential behind distributed ledger technology is the difference between private, public, and hybrid blockchains and how that kind of ties into permission and permissionless blockchains, right? And Erich, I kind of want to get your point of view over here when it comes to IP transactions and patent transactions, right? What kind of setup do you have underneath the hood? Is it a private blockchain? Is it a permission blockchain? Like, what do you see as the
look, I remember when I was at, not the Bitcoin consensus, but I was another consensus, I think in 2018 or 19. And I said that we were on Hyperledger, and somebody said, well, that's not really a blockchain. I'm like, whatever it is, it's what the people I work with want. So that's what I'm using. But here's what I found. It was actually a really interesting academic argument as to whether we wanted public or private. The truth is they want both. And so for any given transaction, if party A and B are party to it, and party B says, yeah, let's make this public because that's good for my business. And party A says, yeah, okay, then you know what, A and B, make it public, knock yourselves out. But in a situation where party A says, let's make it public, and party B says, no, there has to be a way to not do that. And so that's what I think you're going to find in enterprise more often than not, is that they're just simply, they're not prepared today. And that's one of the things I would tell you on the adoption side that I've seen is that, sure, there are certain things that, sure, you want to make everything public, knock yourself out. But there are certain things where they're still not quite comfortable with that. And so you need something where you have the capability to address both. It's as simple as that in enterprise. And to say that it's one way or the other is people who haven't worked in enterprise.
Yep.
So when do you actually address a private blockchain versus a public blockchain versus a hybrid blockchain versus that blockchain or this blockchain and all these blockchains and all these different options?
I lived in that world in the late 90s from a technological perspective as well. You'd walk into companies in Northern California, and they'd have like these plaques on the wall that says, this is a .NET shop or this is a Linux shop, right? And I was like, yeah, I just don't care, right? Like you could have 4 monks in the back, and as long as it works, bud, I'm game. So I think that but I do think that the public-private thing is a little bit different. So you need to have the capability to expose it when they want it exposed and to not expose it when they don't want it exposed. And I don't know how to explain it any simpler. There might be a more technical way to explain it, but that's what enterprise is demanding. And if you can't deliver that, forget it.
So
It's
for
about
people
control.
so for people new to blockchain and booze, right, and new in the sector in general, when you say expose, they expose of data, of transactions, of information. That's what you're referring to, right?
Yeah. So let's just take a really simple thing. I sell my patented Kia, right? And I don't want anybody to know how much Kia paid for it. And Kia's like, I got this guy, I got it for $100,000 and it was worth $1 million. Well, you know what? People might not want that public for a whole bunch of reasons, right? Alternatively, I might say, well, wait a minute, I've got a bunch of patents, so I want people to know what Kia bought them for, because that shows what a reasonable person I am as a seller, and I've got this whole basket of stuff I'm trying to sell. And it might change week to week, it might change deal to deal, it might change whatever. And for now, look, I can see a time, and I think these people are right, that over time, it will migrate towards open. No question about it, in my mind.
Yep.
But there is a period of time where enterprise, who's just in this acceptance phase and about to enter the adoption phase, has said, I just can't open everything up, and I want some level of control over that. So when I first met Medha, I remember having this conversation with her. I'm sure he was appalled at my lack of understanding of blockchain.
No, it wasn't.
That's what I said. I'm like, look, it's not either or. And these people at Ethereum and Bitcoin who are just like telling me it's not really blockchain, I'm like, I don't care. I need to accommodate both because the people I'm dealing with want both. Yep. So please.
And we went and built that. We went and built it. So
yep.
So Medha and Nitin, do you guys and I target this one towards you guys because I don't know, based off the research that I did, obviously Medha, you guys are building all these tools and services and gateways to easily adopting enterprise blockchain. Nitin, obviously IBM being IBM, is there some form of framework you guys kind of show clients and interested interested clients, like this is what goes into determining, okay, you're going to need a hybrid blockchain because you're trying to achieve X, Y, and Z. You're going to need it permissionless or permission because you're trying to achieve, like, is there a framework that you guys use, or is there an industry standard that people look at to kind of make these decisions?
So, and maybe I'll say this, and Medha, you are certainly building this so you can validate what I've been talking about. So I actually two of us wrote a book on this topic based on our 6 years worth of work and debating the things that Erich mentioned. And Erich is right. I don't think Erich cares what it is as long as Erich is able to meet his design requirements. So when we use the word design, oftentimes it's viewed as design thinking when you're going on I'm thinking more design from Apple and Steve Jobs perspective, where you look into what is the core elements of how do you design a blockchain system, what are the elements of consensus that drives some of these trust elements that go into it. So I use the word trust system that go behind it. So after Hyperledger, I built Worldwide, which is a cross-border payment network, just to be able to experiment, and we had limited experiments in that space where we looked into getting some of the MTOs and actually transacting, building on Stellar, a little offshoot from Hyperledger, just to understand what does it take to build a private public network to validate that concept, validate that theory, and we basically build a methodology, and it's published in a bunch of chapters in that book that we published 2 years back. Is looking into figuring out what are the design elements that drive the requirements. Oftentimes, and this is your earlier comment on solidity, we are quick to say, look, you have the basic infrastructure, let's go and get it. But to be able to come to the point that, look, this is the 6-7 things that we need, and now let's go and choose the technology behind it, which probably led Medha to go and pick, to say, look, let me go and build these sort of Lego blocks for me to build around it. That's the path we've taken. And there's some important piece that I'd like to mention here, and at some point get Erich's perspective. We are really building things of value. So something called risk model framework should be essential to every technical project,
right? Because
at some point you have the notion of governance. You have toolings that are meant to deal with these things, and that is something. I'll leave it at that for now. But those two things that I think have been sort of the guiding principles for me. The one, do we need blockchain? If we do need blockchain, the design criteria and risk model framework that drives everything else. I'll leave it at that. Maybe I'll get your perspective on this.
It's very similar, right? So it's like, who are the participants in the blockchain, right? Like, do you need, based on your business and how you go to market, do you need a private blockchain because your data needs to be controlled privately? Or do you need a consortium blockchain because, let's say, for example, your Visa, right? So someone like Visa would want to build a consortium blockchain so all the participants in the Visa ecosystem can participate in the blockchain, and there's value in that, right? So when we meet with companies, and we've actually met with companies that are looking at private, hybrid, and consortium chains, right? And it really comes down to, like, who are going to be the participants in the protocol? What is the data security, right? The constraints around, does it benefit from being transparent? Is the data presently publicly available, and is it a matter of making it more accessible? Or are you looking for a very high layer of trust, but you yet still don't want to necessarily make it public, which is an excellent candidate for a hybrid chain? So really it is that kind of requirements analysis with the company to say, what is your go-to-market for your product or your service? Are there going to be participants in the blockchain? Is it going to be a consortium? Do you benefit from the trust of a public layer? And is there data security and, you know, transparency concerns? And if so, maybe a hybrid is the right choice. And so that's really the way we think about it. And the great thing is the Casper technology can be easily adapted to, you know, either a hybrid or permissioned or consortium model without any code changes. So we've built something that's really, you know, really flexible in that regard.
Amazing. I want to jump into the QA really quick because there's some interesting points over here from the audience that's tuning live in Remo itself. And obviously, Medha, I know you have to leave a little bit early, so feel free to jump off whenever you need to. But
thanks.
Jumping into the conversation. So interested, this one comes from Jeremy Foreman, okay? I'm interested in hearing more about the application of public blockchains as it relates to public infrastructure. What are solutions or what are some solutions for U.S. governments?
Oh gosh. So for, you know, well, we are in talks with several governments today. We haven't disclosed who we're in talks with, but we are in talks with governments. So an excellent example is like exchanges, right? So they may have internal commodities exchanges or other exchanges that are presently not using blockchain technology that will actually benefit from the use of blockchain technology, right? Of course, you see all the sovereign currencies coming out. That's a fairly straightforward, you know, first implementation of blockchain technology. But I think you can get into really interesting things like around, you know, property transactions, right? So, you know, the notion of title, right? So title is this notion in governments, right? So you have a lot of white collar title theft in the United States alone. If that wasn't a blockchain technology, it'd be much, much more difficult to even steal a title to somebody's house. So I think it does eliminate a lot of fraud. It streamlines a lot of processes and makes auditing a lot easier. So I think there's some great use cases there for governments when they're ready.
Yeah, and some of the work, for example, this has been open, so there's nothing confidential about it. Payments, we have the burden of legacy in the US. We are probably far behind in many developed economies in terms of real-time payments. The fourth interpretive letter, which looked into creating a parallel rail for stable coins, is a testament that US needs the real-time payment systems. And we begin to see billions of dollars, as you know, Adam, and all of us, that it's moving via stable coins. So that's a proof point, and I think the industry has accepted this in terms of granting the banking licensing to many of the newer players who are coming into the picture. That's one. Biden administration post-COVID have looked into the deficiency of supply chain. There's a massive, massive focus from Department of Commerce and Treasury in terms of focusing on improving the US supply chain. And to Medha's point, digital dollar has been a massive focus. The Federal Reserve in Boston has tasked the MIT labs in terms of looking into digital dollar. We're looking into it. I'm part of the Stanford Digital Currency Initiative. We're looking into figuring out as to what can we do to, again, stimulus was an example, but I can see of 100 different things that we could do with solving the problem, not just for the retail payments, but going after DVP and security settlement, which is hundreds of billions of dollars, which is a big problem in the US. So I'll leave it at that for now.
I love how you bring that up because like the whole stimulus checks is probably the most relevant form of conversation that we can have in terms of like B2C type of enterprise blockchain development and use cases. Erich, go ahead.
No, look, what I would also say is whoever asked that question, look at which government is right. So, you know, you want to do a little history, go look at what Estonia is doing, but then compare China in the US, right? And if you look at BSN, which is Casper's a part of that actually, and what China's doing, I work a lot with China. They're not a little ahead; they're way ahead.
Yeah,
okay. And so just think about that. So the change over the last 20 years, just you saw stuff always go west to east. Start to think about what's going east to west, and you might want to watch them a little bit more closely if you're starting a company or starting an application.
I agree, and just for one thing, Erich, to that, there was a public comment on how much should we ask for from Congress, and there was a whole thing of should we ask for 100 million? I'm like, no, if China spends 1 billion, we should ask for 10 billion.
It's embarrassing, right? I mean, she talks about blockchain, right? I haven't heard Biden or Trump mention it, right? Other than in a negative connotation. So, look at the different governments and how they're reacting, and my guess is you're going to see it adopted quicker in places like Africa and China than you are in the West because they still fear it at the government level.
Interesting. Guys, I think that's a perfect place to end it up and wrap it off. Before I let you guys go, I want to quickly plug each of your organizations and yourselves. So Kia, Erich, and Nitin, let me know where can we find more info about you your company, and what you do. So we'll start with Kia, go to Erich, and finish with Nitin.
Sure, you can reach our website at bitgo.com. Also on social media, just look up BitGo. We provide infrastructure for many of the players in this industry. We're in the background. It's not a sexy job. That's kind of our infrastructure API business, but we are also a financial services provider to financial institutions, allowing to custody assets, do staking, those type of services. Also, we got a lending desk. We got a trading product that's a prime brokerage model. So, when you hear these large announcements of, this guy bought this much Bitcoin, this guy bought that much Bitcoin, they all need a mechanism to be able to easily purchase large amounts of Bitcoin, store it safely in a compliant manner, in an insured environment with professionals. And if they want to put their assets to work, that's what we do for them. And Adam, it's been amazing. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So you're cheers to you, man. So you'd say if Apple was in the business of buying Bitcoin, they'd come to you.
Yes.
Okay, so that you heard that Apple. Stay awake. Go to BitGo. Erich, where can we learn more about IPwe and find you online?
Yeah, so hey, look, it's 4 letters, www.ipwe.com. So it's easy to find, and Google works pretty well as well. And look, it's an obscure asset class today, but it's going to become more and more relevant to all of us. And whether you're a capitalist like I, or you're someone on the other end of the perspective, it's relevant to what you do, and you can improve your financial well-being or improve society through using it. And we're trying to accommodate all of you.
Amazing. And Nitin?
So quick, again, honored to be here. I usually don't drink on Tuesdays, but because of this show, we started drinking on Tuesdays. So thank you, Adam, for that. But Kia, I heard this morning in terms of BlockFi's Real Vision, they talked about you guys in terms of custody solutions. So congratulations on that piece. Erich, I've seen you from the accelerator days in Columbia University, one of my colleagues, Jules, who came up with the whole thing. Really good to see this sort of come to life. We've been talking about patenting on blockchain for over 3 years before you came to bring this to life. So congratulations on that. And of course, CasperLab has been, have taken this enterprise blockchain to the whole new level. For me, happy to connect with me. People are connecting me on LinkedIn. I write regularly. It's one way for me to not just put my learnings to words, but also one way to share what we've done, which is a big part of who we are. But of course, from an IBM blockchain perspective, ibm.com/blockchain will give you our commitment and projects that we're working on, especially in areas of healthcare, COVID, health pass, supply chain, the whole 9 yards. But connect with me and connect with our teams. Happy to provide that perspective all along.
Amazing. And I'll sign off for Medha. So Medha Parlik, CTO of CasperLabs, co-founder of CasperLabs, full disclosure, also a portfolio company of ours of Draper Gore and Holm. Guys, it's been a pleasure having you on. I'm so excited. This has become a little bit more sexy for me, this whole topic of enterprise blockchain. And I don't know if it's the drinks or the level of knowledge here, but cheers to each of you. Thank you for being on Blockchain and Booze. And sure. Erich, I know it's late for you in Paris. Nitin, I don't know where you are, Kia, but if you guys want to stick around for the networking, it's my favorite part. So everybody that's still watching live right now, go to meet.blockchainbooze.io. That's meet.blockchainbooze.io. And essentially everybody that's been watching live gets to congregate in Remo, where we get to network, meet, take shots, laugh, hang out with everybody that's been tuning into this session. So meet.blockchainbooze.io. I need to get that tattooed somewhere because I feel like I've been oversaying that every single time. And when you get there, make sure to turn on your camera and your microphone, and you'll be able to click from table to table and network and mingle, and it's a lot of fun. So go there. Guys, it's been a pleasure again. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Take care.
See ya. Guys, I'm gonna stick around for just one more minute because I gotta see everyone in the networking because I want to meet everyone and take shots with everyone. So again, meet.blockchainbooze.io, and I'm gonna leave this up for now, and then I'm gonna go and congregate at meet.blockchainbooze.io. We'll see you there.